All of a sudden, the spatial rift began to tremble violently before extending toward both the left and the right, forming an opening that was constantly growing wider. As the opening continued to expand, more and more light came surging out of it like turbulent waves of the sea. And a translucent wall of light that was around 50 to 60 feet in size took shape in front of Han Li. The mantra-treasured axis brightened even further while beginning to rapidly revolve, and the time Dao runes on its surface were also trembling violently, causing the nearby space to twist and warp. An indecisive look appeared on Han Li's face at the sight of the unfolding phenomenon, but in the end, he decided to wait and observe for now. There were countless specks of light that were surging incessantly over the wall of light, and the things depicted on its surface were rapidly changing. Initially, everything was flashing extremely quickly, and it was impossible to make out exactly what was being depicted on the wall of light, but it didn't take long before the image began to stabilize, forming a few concrete outlines. Han Li was able to tell from these outlines that he seemed to have been looking at a group of people. Right at this moment, a dull, fizzling sound rang out, and one of the time Dao runes on the mantra Ke. Treasured axis quickly dimmed before turning a dull grey color. Han Li faltered slightly upon seeing this. Even though the axis was currently out of his control, his spiritual connection with it was still intact, and just now he could feel that his connection to that grey time Dao rune had been severed. It felt like some type of mysterious power had sucked something out of his body, leaving him with a sense of emptiness, and this was something that had never happened before. However, instead of immediately withdrawing the mantra-treasured axis, he forced himself to remain calm and continue observing, as he had a feeling that there was something special about this wall of light. With the dimming of that time Dao rune, the scene depicted on the wall of light gradually became a little clearer, and it seemed to have been depicting a mountaintop with a large object at the center, surrounded by several blurry figures of different statures. Furthermore, there were also some colorful things flashing over the sky above. Right as Han Li was about to activate his bright sight spirit eyes to take a closer look, a dull fizzling sound rang out once again, and another one of the time Dao runes on the mantra-treasured axis turned grey. Han Li's expression darkened slightly upon seeing this, but a contemplative look had also appeared in his eyes. Immediately thereafter, one more time Dao rune turned dark. It seemed that the time Dao runes on the mantra-treasured axis were progressively dimming at set intervals, and an enlightened look appeared in his eyes as he hurriedly turned his gaze back to the wall of light. Sure enough, with the dimming of those two time Dao runes, the image on the wall of light had become clearer once again. After around 5 or 6 more time Dao runes turned grey, Han Li discovered that he was able to make out a mountain summit with a forest of lush trees around a strange rock. The mountain summit was enshrouded within a boundless sea of clouds, and at the center of the scene was a round stone platform that was around 10,000 feet in radius and roughly 1,000 feet tall. The platform had an azure coloration, and it was connected to the mountain below it. Appearing to have been a naturally formed structure, there were several cracks on the surface of the stone platform, and it was covered in moss and vines, indicating that it was a very old structure. At this moment, there were 5 or 6 figures spread around the stone platform, and all of them were extremely strange in appearance. One of them was very tall, but he was as thin as a bamboo stick, and he was wearing an extremely loose-fitting yellow robe that draped down all around him. Additionally, his hair resembled a mop of withered yellow wheat, and his face was also extremely yellow and uneven, riddled with pockmarks like the bark of an old tree, as was the case with the skin on his hands, and he resembled a being from the wood tribe of the spirit realm. Beside him was a very short figure that was no more than 5 foot tall, and he was also very thin and, compared with the extraordinarily tall man beside him, he resembled a small child, yet his head was as large as a water vat, making him appear extremely unbalanced, as if he could fall flat on his face at any moment. The third person had a set of remarkably long arms and legs, as well as huge hands and feet the size of banana leaves. The skin of his bared upper body was a fiery red colour, as if he had been roasted, and there were circles of extremely strange patterns inscribed upon his skin. There was also a tuft of fiery red hair on the top of his head, with tiny flames springing out occasionally from within. The fourth person was a child that appeared to have been around 5 or 6 years of age. He had a round body and a round head, resembling a small ball stacked onto a larger ball. He was wearing a doo-doo, as one would expect of an ordinary child, but his arms were twice the length of the average person's, hanging down to his knees, and they also each had an extra joint, giving them an extremely strange appearance. The final person was enormous in stature, several times larger than everyone else, and he was wearing some type of demon beast-hide garment. His skin was a dark green colour, and he stood like a metal tower on the mountain-top. None of these strange beings appeared to have been humans, yet their facial features somehow resembled human ones. The 5 of them formed a circle with several thousand feet separating each of them, and they were either standing, sitting, or kneeling on the ground, while their eyes were collectively focused on a portly, red-robed monk seated with his legs crossed at the centre of the platform. The folds of fat on the monk's face compressed his eyes to a pair of tiny slits, and his earlobes were so long that they draped all the way down to his shoulders. Below his head was an extremely rotund bod, to the point that his already extremely large red robes, Xianxia robe, wasn't even able to cover his entire body. As a result, his enormous belly was exposed, and it hung all the way down onto the ground, making him resemble a mountain of flesh. At first glance, a strange thought sprang into Hanli's mind. Is this person able to walk or even stand up? However, that thought only flashed through his mind for a moment before he spotted several interesting details about the rotund monk. Firstly, the Xianxia robe that he was wearing was no ordinary garment. There were many gemstones of different colours attached to it, all of which were glowing brightly. Furthermore, he was holding a string of jade prayer beads, and all of the beads were glittering and translucent in appearance, releasing a faint azure glow that disoriented the senses, while runes could be seen dancing inside the beads. As for the monk himself, while it was true that he was extraordinarily fat, his entire body was giving off a faint sheen, and it was as if he were the centre of the entire world. The monk's lips were moving, and he seemed to have been speaking. However, instead of sounds, a string of 5 coloured runes was flowing out from between his lips, forming a stream of 5 coloured light that spread through the surrounding area before rising up into the air and disintegrating, seemingly resonating with heaven and earth. Countless specks of light emerged from the stream of light before transforming into gusts of fierce wind that formed several massive tornadoes. However, these tornadoes would instantly fade away as soon as they took shape, transforming into a storm of fire that came raining down from the heavens. Before the rain of fire had a chance to descend onto the ground, it transformed into a storm of ice that froze the surrounding air. All of these phenomena were extremely lifelike, but every single one of them would vanish as soon as they appeared, causing the nearby space to tremble incessantly, while the sea of clouds surged and churned. Hanli was very much intrigued by what he was seeing. He noticed that regardless of what phenomena were being conjured up, the stone platform and the environment around it remained completely unaffected, and even the leaves on the surrounding trees remained completely still. At the same time, there were countless golden lotus flowers blooming behind the portly monk's head, forming a huge golden cloud that was extremely profound in appearance. As the cloud gently swayed from side to side, ripples that were visible even to the naked eye could be seen surging through the space around it. The strange-looking figures around the stone platform paid no heed to the phenomena taking place up above, and they continued to stare intently at the portly monk, listening to him speak in a completely enraptured state. After speaking for a while, the portly monk paused for a moment, and the streak of 5 coloured light surging through the air faded alongside all of the phenomena. The trembling space and the churning sea of clouds gradually settled down as well, and the tall yellow-robed figure suddenly rose to his feet before extending a salute toward the monk. The monk and the other figures all turned to him, and the yellow-robed figure began to speak while making a series of hand gestures, seemingly raising a question to the monk. All of the other figures were nodding along unconsciously as they listened to him speak, as if they shared the same question, and all of them then turned to the portly monk with expectant expressions. The portly monk threw his head back and burst into laughter upon hearing the yellow-robed figure's question, causing all of the flabby rolls over his body to tremble with mirth. The space around the mountain also began to rumble with the portly monk's laughter, while the sea of louds churned and the mountain trembled. A stunned look appeared on Han Li's face upon seeing this. Who exactly was this portly monk to be able to affect the environment around him so severely with just his laughter alone? After his laughter subsided, the portly monk began to speak again, while making a series of gestures with his rotund hands, seemingly answering the yellow-robed man's question. An enlightened look appeared on the yellow-robed man's face as he listened to the portly monk's answer, and he extended a respectful bow to the monk before sitting down again. Everyone else was enlightened by the answer provided, and they all bowed to the portly monk as well before sitting back down. The portly monk lowered his hands as he continued his lecture, and the 5 figures around him began to listen intently with enraptured looks on their faces. Looking at the intoxicated expressions on everyone's faces, Han Li was suddenly overcome by a strong desire to hear what the monk was saying. However, even the image displayed on the wall of light had become countless times clearer than before. He was unable to hear anything at all, so he could only look on in dismay.